questions or comments? Any? Okay. Frank?
Yeah, my name is Frank. I just love your discussions. However, you guys only talk on the social aspects. But for me to be really integrated well in any society, you need to be, it's not only the social aspect, but you don't forget the economic aspect and the political aspect, whereby Africans, we need to be active. Economically, you need to get active in each and every organization or any topic where we can exchange views so that we can be heard. So we need to professionalize our lobbying system. Without a lobbying point, there's nothing you're going to do. Your voice needs to be heard. Economically, if we don't start creating jobs, employ our own people, there's no way we are going to come from this hole out. Forget. We have people from Turkey, from Vietnam. When you go, you could see they have associations. If someone wants to open up an IMBIS, he knows the person who can tell him or her, please, you have to follow ABCD. They have their banks. You go to Manzan, Dong Phi Park, for Vietnamese. You can't find each and every support you need if you're from Vietnam and you need to open up something here. You go to the Chinese community, they have the Chinese cultural centers. They have the China House. When you go there, those cultural centers are not for culture as people think. People meet there for business meetings. Your community, your ethnic group will never be accepted in any society if you are poor. That's my point of view.
Interesting point. And we've been talking about the fact that as African community, we are not really a community yet in Germany. We are lacking that. And maybe our panelists can, chip in on that.
I mean, it's
how do we
interesting.
go about this? It's a challenge. It's a big one.
I mean, you named countries, and we're talking about a continent. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing. I think.
We should stop this habit of hiding behind a continent.
No. Let me finish my statement. Right. It's about the shared background and heritage that enables that community to form here. Right. And the idea that you can come to a place and find a familiarity within that. Right? And there's no denying that, yes, regardless of the similarities across the continent, right, our shared upbringing stops at a point. There's a limitation to just how much we can, understand about Tanzania. I was not born and raised there, right? And so I think, first of all, we need to recognize that there is that difference, right? And that's not to say it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's a thing. It exists. Let's acknowledge that. Now, how do we work from that point to build a stronger network and community, right? And how do we work to create an understanding of, okay, fine, this is how we do business in Zimbabwe, this is how we do business in Nigeria. We're in Germany, we're going to adapt these a little bit so that we can find something that works for the community that we're trying to build. I think in ignoring that we're coming from very different places, we're doing ourselves a disservice, for sure.
And Harrison, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, just to add on what you said, I think there are also, some of us, or at least some Africans, they come from the same country, but they still regard themselves as more, they are more connected to their ethnic groups than to their nations, yeah. So again, this is another dimension which we have to look. And so coming from this country and starting here an initiative which is based on a country, sometimes it can also be very tricky. That's why on this issue, I think I'm more Pan-Africanistic. In the end, to find like a place or like a community where maybe all Africans can sit together and they can provide, or at least they can find a way to lobby into the system or into the society, so that African societies can progress, or at least they can progress in the German society. So I think with the examples you gave, like Chinese or Turkish people or Vietnamese, I think it's hard to apply directly to an African country. In Cameroon, you have your issues with the French part and the English part.
Yeah, it's not easy.
It's not easy. So these are like some ideas, maybe at least.
But it's not an impossibility.
It's not an impossibility.
No, I mean,
we have already African Union.
So that is what African Affairs Forum is all about. That
exactly.
It's possible.
I'm Steven from Ghana, and I've been in Germany, let's say, for the past almost 7 years now. And talking on this issue of bringing us together is been, I think it's a big challenge, but I think it starts from us. That as we are having this forum, we should try and collaborate and support one another. Yeah. For example, among the Ghanaian community here, we don't have anything like Ghanaians meeting together, but we have various ethnic groups meeting together. You get, and I think it's similar for most of the other countries, maybe even for the Nigerians, maybe the Igbos, the Yorubas, they meet, or the Hausas, they meet. If you go to the Cameroonians, maybe the grassland people meet, or the other groups also meet. And I've also worked with also a lot of Africans, and it's very difficult, So I think it starts from us. We've identified that this is a challenge, but we must learn to support one another.
Which I believe is the ultimate goal of African Affairs Forum, that we start from here. The whole idea is to be the example that the continent needs, and we can start from the issue of integration and try and make a community of ourselves in Germany first. Do we have any questions or comments? Yeah.
My name is Oswald, and I come from Tanzania. So I spent some couple of years in Northern Africa, and when I was there, every time, like, a lot of people were telling me, like, you're from Africa, something like that. So, and when I came to Europe, it's like, everyone is just saying the same, like, you're from Africa. So I started questioning myself, how do I define Africa, and how does the outside world define Africa? And that's the question I'd like to ask you, like, when we're talking about Africa, what are we focusing on? Geography? The way we look like? Because I think even if you come from New York, you're in Berlin here, the first time they see you, you're African. You were born in Toronto, the first time they see you, you're African. So I think when we talk about Africa and the challenge we're facing, we should really ask ourselves, are we based on geography, culture, religion, identity, or is it because of the way we look like?
Maybe to even throw another wrench into the works, right? There are a lot of Germans with African descent, right? So they themselves were not migrants, but their parents.
I just mentioned New York as an example. It's even far away. I mean, like, it doesn't matter where you come from. Even if you were born in Hong Kong, so long as you look black, when they see you, you're African.
But I'm saying, as in, like, for Afro-Germans, people who identify with Africa, right? But they were born and raised in Germany, right? That's also part of a community that we can also tap into. Like, they would, according to your definition, potentially consider themselves part of this discussion, right?
The things we experience in our society may be different at the moment, but the Nkrumahs, the Gavis, the W.E.B. Du Bois, who were vanguards of Pan-Africanism, all believe that it wasn't just about those who are in the continent, but those who also are outside of the continent, who believe that they are part of this continent and want the betterment of the continent. So it was, the Africans in the Caribbean, in the US, the Africans in France, it was the Africans all over. And I think that is the same spirit that we should, carry on. It's not about if you grew up in the continent or not, but you have a passion for the continent, for the betterment of the continent. And if we are able to follow this spirit and go along with this, I think it would be be the best thing to do. So it may have changed, which I think you raise a good question, and we should debate on this. Things have changed now, but
Yeah, just to add on that, maybe we could clarify a little bit more. I think here, the panelists here, we are Africans, of course. But we are Africans from the continent, right? So from Cameroon, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. Yeah? So I think, of course, it could be nice to bring in, let's say, an African or like a person who is born in German, but with an African immigration background. Maybe one parent is from an African country, or both parents. Yeah. So I think, and I think we may have different challenges to integrate compared to those who were born here, and maybe they regard themselves as German. And there is this typical story, like, where are you from? Just because you're black, where are you from? And the typical story is that most of these people, maybe they're just born here in Berlin. If you confront them like this, then there are some identity crisis which comes in, like, so I'm born here, but I'm still rejected. So they have different challenges on integration, especially after being born here. And for us, I have the feeling, even if you face such challenges, being asked where you're from, I'm from Tanzania and I'm proud of myself. I have like a place to lay back. When I go back to Tanzania, I feel like now I can even scream. I'm at home. But some of the Africans who are living in other parts of the world, they don't have these places. So I recognize these differences, and I have to admit that we have different challenges compared to those who live in abroad.
Yeah.
And it's it's another issue that we have to deal with, because it's a really big challenge. A friend of mine who is French, she knows nowhere else except for France.
Exactly.
She always gets the same question, where are you from? And she's like, I am French. And people are like, okay, where are you from?
Or your parents.
Exactly. So that's another challenge that we have to face. And everyone should, engage. Let's talk about this.
I don't know if you really answer my question, because I think my sister was saying something like when you talked about Africa, she said like Africa is a continent and not a country. And Alnola said the same thing. Like we cannot compare it to Turkey. We cannot compare it to Vietnam or whatever, because those are countries. And my question, what I say, like, how do we view Africa? Do we view it from a geographic point of view, or like from the color of our skin? That's what I mean. Like when the Turkish people are going there, they're viewed as people from a country. But when we go in there is no geographic thing there. It's about how we look like, and that's what I mean. Like when we go into face the world, they don't see our geography. They don't see where we come from. All they see the skin color. And like when you're saying like, okay, we should consider maybe the religion or the press, the culture, whatever, but we should know that the great challenge we're facing is not about the culture, it's not about religion, it's not about ethnic groups, it's not about country or whatever, it's about the way you look. I mean, like when we think about supporting each other, that we should focus more on like the obstacle we're having. It's not about, they don't even know. Like I remember last time there was a girl who was doing her master's and she was doing a research. And she was asking me like the representation of African culture and Africa in the German media. I was like, you want me to talk about African culture? You know what I mean? Like Africa is 54 countries. Tanzania is having 124 languages. And every language gets its own culture. A language is an element of culture. And you want me to talk about African culture? I was like, it's overwhelming. And what I mean is like, how that the outside world looks at us.
So
that was my question.
To your question,
yeah.
Right? It's how do we identify as ourselves?
And how does the outside world identify us?
Yeah, and I think as a community, I think we've kind of answered that, right?
Yeah.
So it's, yes, it could be people born from the continent or people with connections to the continent. But in the context of the community we're trying to build, I think people who, as Linda rightly said, people who want to see the continent succeed. And that I think is an open invitation, right? We want to build this community. If you're from the continent, connected to it, which way, and you want to build it, then you're welcome. In terms of how people see us, I mean, my immediate response is, who cares, right? Because we're at that point where we need to change that narrative. We cannot be reacting to how people see us. We need to be telling them what they should be seeing, right? And so it's flipping the conversation. And so that's also part of the reason why I mentioned before story series, right? I think it's important to document and capture African stories so that it's not a question of, okay, so what happened with Africans in 2018 in Germany? It's there for everyone to see because the Africans told their own story. I think in waiting for other people to define us, as has happened for generations, we're now stuck and boxed in where we're trying to edge our way out of someone else's confines. And if we take the initiative, and I know it's not easy, it requires a lot of structural change, it requires a lot of policy change, it requires a lot of dialogue. And yes, that's when I say doing the work, that's what I mean, that we need to be willing to put in the work to change some of these systems. But at the end of the day, it's us telling the world, this is what Africa is, and this is who Africans are, regardless of what you may or may not think about that.
Yeah, true.
Okay, we have more questions and comments. This will be the last round of questions and comments because we're running out of time, but let's do it.
Two little points. I am one of those terrible Germans. When I see people with a black face, my first reaction is precisely that question: where are you from? For myself, I interpret it in a different way than you do. I think it shows an interest in Africa. This person wants to know something more about Africa. So my advice would be, don't take it offensively or racist. It's precisely the people who maybe have been one day in Africa, like myself, or who are, for one reason or another, having an NGO in Africa, who are interested to know more about Africa. So even if it could be a racist undertone, very often it's not meant that way. My second remark for that situation would be what I experienced last week in hospital. One of the nurses came in, and she was definitely of African origin. So I asked her this stupid question, where are you from? And out of her mouth came absolutely pure Berlin, Neukölln dialect. It was absolutely obvious that person was born here. Now, even for me, although I know the things you talk about, it still comes as a surprise to see somebody whom I classify in my head as somebody who comes from Africa, to realize that that person is bred and born here and speaks perfect Swabian or whatever dialect better than any other German very often. Yeah. Now, your problem, I think, is simply a question of time. There are still very few, relatively few. It's a new phenomenon that we have Africans who have children here, who are grown up here. The number is increasing very rapidly. So just wait for another generation, and that question will not be asked anymore.
All right. First of all, I wanted to add on what he just said. I think when we are talking about everything we are discussing now, sometimes we forget about some very important things. First of all, I don't get offended when someone asks me, where are you from? The only problem we have is that we already have a preset mindset that this person, when they ask me this question, is because of this. But sometimes out of innocence, they are asking the question. Another thing I wanted to ask, we have been saying that it's very hard to bring Africans together. For me, I wouldn't be so fast to say it's very hard to bring Africans together. Because one thing I noticed, having lived in different countries in Africa itself, Asia, and now in Europe, I find when people are outside of the country, regardless of the differences they had, they have that feeling of unit. Like for me, when I see my sisters here, I don't have. I see her. Maybe, yeah. That's the point. Because I know he's from Tanzania. But I'm talking about those I couldn't notice instantly that they are from this country or this country. The first question comes, oh, here is someone I would feel that I know. Not because she's black, but because we share some things. Not necessarily, but yeah, that is one thing. So, my question would be, you say some people raise the issue of Vietnamese, Chinese, Taiwanese, and whatever. They say they are more successful. Why not us? And you say it's hard to bring Africans together. Do you think it's easy to bring Chinese together? Exactly. They are more than, probably even more than 200 ethnicities in China alone. In Vietnam, the same. And these people might be even facing the hardest challenges more than we do. Some of them are still in war. But when they meet outside in the diaspora, they forget about the problems they have at home. I've helped more Africans from different countries than my own countrymates. Not because I was only focusing on who I should have, but because when we are outside in diaspora, we don't think about our differences. Here, Kenyans don't think of Kikuyu and Luos anymore. To them, brothers and sisters. So before we say that, oh, these are successful because they come from the same country. No, I don't agree with that perception. Rather, we as African, the leaders of this African Union, go to those other ethnicities, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, whoever you see that are successful, ask them, how did you succeed, regardless of differences in ethnicities?
Yeah, I'm Mr. Opio from Uganda. I think this has been quite a very complex topic since the genesis, and I don't know when it's gonna end. There's one thing that we really don't have to forget about Africa, that something that makes somehow certain thing works well, say in China or Vietnam, is like a key language, but this is the greatest challenge in Africa. Like, if it is not English, what else would we be speaking, by the way, here? French, we're just borrowing from. Yeah, so this is really, I think we are still fighting a war that we never started. It was started by the colonial masters. And okay, that was not my concern. My other part of the concern is here in Germany, let me not talk about diaspora at large, that we know we Africans came here on different reasons and by different means. Though we are we are kind of seen like we come through one means, right? Through the water, which is not the case for some of us. But there is one challenge I'm seeing here when you are making 4 years in some month to come here. But there's this one thing I really encounter with the people who lived here in Germany. They ask, what do you think about getting, a nationality? I say, what is it for? So this is like attached to opportunity. First of all, you move from Africa, but then when you are here, the situation compels you to even move away from Africanness itself, which is the hardest thing you can do, by the way. Africanness is not Africa. You can run away from Africa, but you will never run away from Africanness. So I'm also seeing this challenge. Let's say all Africans come to Germany today, and we all have the mentality of, let's get German nationality. And the condition here, you give away all you had. That's your local nationality. And then there will be nothing like Africa tomorrow. So what do we think about this?
Yeah, I'm called Jos Ajabo. I'm actually a German Ugandan, if you want to say. So I've lived here for long. and for a long time. That means I've had the experiences of getting Africans who have come here and tried to integrate themselves into the German society. As the topic stands, how do we integrate ourselves into the society? My experience from this end, I'll let you know that we have had several African groups here who have formed different organizations and who have tried to integrate themselves into the German society. The only problem they have had is always they align themselves only to the political point of view, not like the economic point of view, what Mr. Frank wanted actually to elaborate. We would have progressed much better if we had a well-formed body here with a bank, maybe African Development Bank owned by Africans here who will be supporting the others and so on. Those are the challenges which we should have, first of all, addressed in order to integrate into this society. German society is a very complicated society. How you get integrated is how you speak the language, how you behave, how you respect the law, how you pay your dues, and how you do everything according to the German standards. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like, as you guys already mentioned, let me give you just an example of Berlin. Germany has 16 states, and each state is represented in Berlin. They have their own house to lobby. But outside your team, they go there as German. So for us, that's my view. We need to be, you can be from Kenya where, but when it comes to Africa, then we can join as a team and we have one strong voice. But our own nationalities or associations which we belong to, they have to be strong enough. That's why if you come anywhere, I was in China 13 months, you go, you see Bayern, is it Hofbräu. Bremen is presented, Hamburg House. But when there's a situation about Germany, they join as a team. So this business of saying we are too complete, we have other problems. But if we can be, if I can understand Jos, you understand people from Cameroon very well, no matter how which differences you have. You can easily convince them as when somebody from Algeria will come in. So for me, let us just we build our small societies. When it comes to Africa, we join as a team. Then I think we can benefit from it. Thank you.
But I'd like to, these were more of comments than questions, but I'd like to highlight on like the questions you should tackle. Still on the economic integration, he wants us to brainstorm on that, which I think is a good point. Mm-hmm. And the second one is about, leaving all behind when you come to Germany. What happens when there is no Africa? I want to start off with our brother from Tanzania on the issue of asking the question of where you're from. And I want to believe that everyone in this room has no problem identifying that you're African from Nigeria, from Ghana. I think we're all proud of that. I think the point we raised was the fact that, you have people who have connections to the country, who have parents who are from Africa, but they grew up in Germany, and then they find themselves being asked that question. But I want to believe that we all are proud of our roots. And I'll open the floor now to the panelists to say, final comments on this. I will continue the discussion at the end of the session. So, Eleanor?
According to the question, where are you from? I'm living here since for a long time. As I went here, I'm so annoyed if people ask me, where are you from? What are you doing here? After the study, are you going to turn back to Cameroon? I ask them, how? How you ask me? But now, with the time, I try also. Where are you from? Since when are you here in Germany? What are you doing here? Are you talking turn back? I'm asking us because of small talk. If I meet someone, I may have one topic. How can I begin to talk with him? What, according to my job, that is what I'm asking. Are you living here with the family? Are you alone? To know if you are lonely, or if you have someone who can empower you, who can give you an idea or something. And that's what, don't take the question so bad, don't take it so bad, but try to answer normally. Maybe he have interest to know you, he have something for you, before he spent maybe 3 or 10 years in Ghana or the Congo, I don't know exactly, he want to share that with you. That's the question. For me, I cannot only say that. Yeah. Take it easy and continue the life.
And Harry?
Yeah, for me, I think I would like to comment a little bit on the issue which you raised, Slim, on the fact that most of the Africans, when we are here, yeah, these differences, they don't count very much. Yeah? I realized actually when I moved to Germany, but I only experienced this in Germany, unfortunately. I've been to the US and other places, but I've not experienced this, that the fact that when you see another African, you nod. Another, let's say, black person. Another black person. So it's like, there is a way that you nod. I experienced here in German, yeah? So I agree with you that there is like some feelings, you know, like there are some attachments as Africans we have, yeah, and especially when we are abroad, it gets even stronger because for the first time I felt like I'm a foreigner when I moved outside Tanzania, because in Tanzania I'm black, I'm just like any other Tanzanian, but I felt really as a foreigner when I moved to German, where like this question again, where are you from? So I have the feeling, I agree with you, when we are here, there is like some strong attachment, strong feelings we have towards each other. And I also want to, and I think with these feelings, and so many things can be done from abroad actually compared to back home, yeah? So that's why I said that I'm in a way a Pan-Africanist, and this should not be applied. I mean, what we have back home, it's more like this political. But I think people in abroad, the diaspora, we can actually make a difference, on this. And on the economic issue, yeah, most of the Africans, we have very big impact back to our home. I mean, most of you are aware of the remittances report, which we see every day, yeah, that we now know that the money we sent back home is more than the development aid which comes from the Western countries or from other countries. Yeah, so we have already impact back home, but each of us, you know, we try to support your family, and this money makes impact. And I think this is a challenge which we have to address it for the Africans who are abroad. I mean, we focus very much on our home countries, but how do we integrate? How do we develop ourselves? You know, here in the German societies or in other societies, and try to make also impact to improve ourselves economically. This is a challenge I think we really need as Africans to address. And I agree with you, there are so many other communities, you see that they support each other, but still we are very much focused to our countries and our small communities, our social network, you know. So this is a challenge, I think, as Africans we have to address, and maybe this African Affairs Forum is one of the hopefully like a starting point to raise these issues. So.
And Wati?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of it has been answered already. It's not an easy conversation to have. So to the point about having to choose between your Africanness and integrating in Germany, I think you're absolutely right. In an attempt to integrate, we tend to try and separate ourselves as much from being the other, right? And if that means that we forsake our Africanness so that we can be welcomed in Germany, you know, so be it. Unfortunately for us, because our skin calls us out, we can never truly be invisible, right? But I think you feel the pressure when you're here to do everything you can to be less, you know, like obvious as an African in the community, whatever that means, you know. So I think that's something to keep in mind and not take for granted, because like you said, people come here they come through different means and they come for different reasons, and they have to make choices when they're there. And I think we owe it to ourselves to be frank about that and to acknowledge that, but to also figure out ways that we can make that easier for other people, or in a way that they don't feel like they have to choose one over the other. With regards to the economic independence of Africans in Germany, I agree. I think we can do a lot more to support each other economically, and going beyond just advice of, okay, this is how you can do your CV or whatever. So I've had a lot of meetings with other Africans about like, okay, so what can I do? How do I get involved? And I think you're the first one who said, you can get involved this way, right? And so now here we are building something together. I think it's us taking on the initiative. If we don't start even in the small ways that we can in our communities, no one else is going to do it for us. So we have to be willing to get our hands dirty and roll up the sleeves, because, I mean, in this environment, we're already up against a system that doesn't see us as capable and smart enough to create something, and then within ourselves we can't support each other as we do that, then we're already putting ourselves at a disadvantage. So I think, I mean, if anything, if we take away anything from this, it's just a willingness and a drive to build kind of the community that we want to be a part of.
Thank you. It's been a stimulating conversation, and even though the cameras will stop rolling, the conversation will continue. I want to say thank you to our panelists and also to the audience who made our time to join us. It was a pleasure having you here, and I believe that this will be the beginning of greater things to happen. Please join us on Facebook on African Affairs Forum and YouTube on African Affairs Forum. Subscribe and follow the discussion so we can kind of make a community for ourselves in Germany. Thank you.